Live. We are live. We're both alive and live.
Live alive.
Yes, so I'm KMO, your host, and I'm talking with Jim, your ad attacker. And we're going to talk about Tesla. Tesla Motors, not Nikola Tesla. So, Jim, you and I had to talk about Tesla, I don't know. At this age, it might have been 5 years ago, but it seems like just the other day.
It
And
does.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you were not particularly fond of the character of Elon Musk, and you weren't particularly impressed with Tesla Motors, although you are a long-time aficionado of electric cars, and you were into them before they were an actual thing,
Oh,
really,
before it was cool.
way before it was cool.
Back when we used lead acid, we could put that in a boat anchor, but no, let's make it drive a car.
So all of my Blue Tribe friends, of course, hate Elon Musk. He's the devil incarnate. He's Hitler. He's Genghis Khan. He's the devil because he bought Twitter. But I'm a big space guy. I'm a big fan of SpaceX. I'm very excited about what SpaceX has done to America's participation in space. And he describes and at different periods when he's had a different focus. Sometimes he's described Tesla as a renewable energy company or a sustainable energy company. Other times he's described it as a software company that happens to make cars. But I don't have a lot emotionally invested in Tesla. I mean, if somebody gave me one, I'd drive it. But aside from that,
Why would you do that?
yeah, well, because it's handy to get from one place to another
Yeah.
quickly and to carry stuff. But other than that, I don't really have a dog in that fight. I'm mostly just amused by Elon Musk, but I have to admire his business acumen. He seems like a goofball, but he's a goofball who runs multiple very large, innovative, forward-pushing companies.
hmm
But when we talked about Tesla in particular, and you had some criticisms, what were your criticisms?
You remember this was 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The most basic thing to understand is when Tesla first came out, I was very excited about them. I thought that was the coolest thing in the world for a company to not just build an electric vehicle, the kind of thing that I've been trying to push people to do for a long time, but to actually make one that's cool, to make a good looking machine. And they, of course, did it right. They did a high end car because there's more profit in a high end car, and that profit can go to research and development. So I used to get really excited whenever a Roadster passed by, or later the Model S. And there's even a Model E, which is the RAV EV that uses the Tesla drive.
Hmm.
RAV EV first came out by Toyota a long time ago, but it used nickel metal hydride batteries and Toyota's own electric drive. And now the new RAV EVs, which weren't really made in great numbers, they're called the Model E by Tesla. So I got excited whenever I saw one of those. And since I'm around Google, Facebook, and, well, mostly Microsoft, there's a lot of people with expendable money who are interested in electric. So I saw a lot of them compared to the average person, I don't know, alongside a cornfield in Iowa. It's just not as many Teslas down there, and I can understand that. So I'm not against Tesla. I have some criticisms with the way they present the newer cars. The older cars, I think the Roadster was a Lotus glider. So they bought a whole bunch of Lotuses without the transmission and the engine and had them shipped over. And then they installed the electric components at their factory. I think that was when they had the factory in Fremont, California. But that was a standard car. That was pretty much a Lotus. When the Model S came out, I finally got a chance to had a good look inside of it and talk to people who own them. And it's like, wait a minute, you have to go through a touchscreen menu to adjust your climate control.
Hmm.
Wait a minute. See, I grew up not only having a father who taught driver's ed, he was president of Washington State Driver's Education. I got away with nothing when it came to learning to drive, and I started at a very early age. And one of the things we used to do back when driver's ed was a thing in Washington State was have the instructor sitting in the passenger seat cover the environmental controls with a clipboard and tell the student who's driving to turn on the defroster. They were made to memorize the defroster so that you can just reach out, touch with your fingertips, and get the defroster going so you could see the road. Obviously, if you need the defroster, you are working a little extra hard to see through the windshield. You don't have time to take your eyes off the road, kids. That's the way things are. When Tesla put that control behind a touch screen, red flags for me. Maybe I'm too old and I need to rock on a porch somewhere in a retirement community. That may be. But I have to wonder, did they start the semi-autonomous driving as a way of helping people cope with the lack of visibility they should be getting from every other car?
You're saying the cars have to be smarter because the drivers are so distracted by the gewgaws and gizmos on the interior?
Not distracted, but by necessity having their eyes taken off the road. So it helps to have an automatic braking system when you get too close to another vehicle if you can't see the other vehicle because the car is too stupid to have a haptic interface to the climate controls. That was tongue in cheek, of course. I'm not literally suggesting that that's their motive. But that was my main complaint about Tesla back in the day.
You also had some complaints about the treatment of workers and safety in Tesla factories.
Yes, indeed I did. Did you have a chance to look at that stuff?
No, I'm just recalling our conversation from however many years ago.
Yes. The fact that, okay, let's start with how influential should any CEO be of a company? And in the case of Elon Musk, it seems to be they allowed him to dictate perhaps things he should not have. For example, at one point, it was impossible to buy a yellow Tesla because Elon Musk did not like the color yellow. All right, that's fine. That's weird. That's just like Henry Ford. You can have it in any color you want as long as it's black. Elon Musk, though, did not like the color yellow so much that the factory they wound up occupying in Fremont, California, did not have any yellow in it. Yellow, the most highly visible and useful safety color known to man, was outlawed from their factory. So right away, that's a problem, and I hope that's been corrected. I don't know, but I hope. Also, when you did get hurt in this place without any yellow jacket striping around the important stuff, you were, of course, taken off the line and sent to the hospital. You were sent to the hospital in a ride share because in order for them to call 911 and have an ambulance arrive at the factory, they would have to record the incident as an accident. So right away, those two things, and they were revealed by the investigative outfit called Reveal. I guess, okay, they were revealed by Reveal, so that makes sense. And I listened to that and I just shook my head. It's like, that has to end. And for all I know, it has. But, this is old news. The earliest Tesla investigation Reveal has done dates back to 2018. So it's very possible they got their act together. I don't know.
But as a thinking person, you encounter new information. And when that new information is not in agreement with your established opinions, you revisit those opinions.
Exactly right. Yes.
What new information have you taken in about Tesla?
Well, let's see. I did like the Sandy Munro video that I sent you, where he was talking about the fact that Tesla was innovating more so than other companies. Excuse me. For example, just yesterday, I was hanging around work, and some of my coworkers who have the expendable income and a penchant to put down a flutter on a stock were kind of bemoaning the fact that their Rivian stock had tanked the day before. And Rivian is another, for those who don't know, is another electric vehicle manufacturer. It makes kind of a cool looking pickup truck. I don't know if you've seen one of those.
I have. I've seen them in real life, in fact, because I just spent several months in Rich People, California, around Lake Tahoe.
Yes, I forgot about that.
Yeah,
yes,
so
you're right there.
I've seen many a Rivian and many a Tesla, although still no Cybertruck.
So Rivian tanked, and I guess the reason that the analysts were giving the tanking was that Rivian was not keeping up with refining their manufacturing in order to bring the cost of manufacturing down. That's what every manufacturer has to do, right? Otherwise, the boss goes, hey, why am I still paying this much for that when I can get it over here for cheaper?
Yep. Unless, of course, it's you're paying for the name, like a Maserati or something.
Right. If you're buying a Rolex, I don't think a battery-operated Rolex is going to sell anytime soon.
And the high price tag is a selling feature.
Oh, yeah. You are differentiating yourself from the plebes. In fact, I think you'll like this one. You know what Land Rover is, right?
Oh, of course.
Oh, yeah. Well, that is a British company that originally built big trucks for people like the Queen to get around her property. I saw one the other day that says, with a bumper sticker that said, "Nice Jeep, peasant." So, yeah, if you're paying a lot of money for something, it's got to be cool. Well, Rivian is cool. It's a $90,000 pickup truck that's all electric, very cool looking. But, yeah, they're stock tank because they haven't been innovating enough and cutting costs. And as Buckminster Fuller will inappropriately say, ephemeralizing their process. It should be etherealizing. I know I lost that battle. I gotcha.
Yeah.
The Sandy Monroe video
showed the question.
Yes, well, raises, begs, whichever you prefer.
I prefer raises.
Very good.
So,
yeah,
please continue.
Oh, the Sandy Monroe video showed some really cool changes to motor design. For one example, they don't just take the copper wire, insulate it so it doesn't like short out, and then wrap it around a standard assembly, as people have made electric motors for hundreds of years have done. They instead have decided that the copper needs to go closest to the other magnet. And so they have made a really thick bullet, looked like a bullet that was lodged in the housing, and then run a thin copper wire that will energize that big copper bullet. So they have improved the efficiency of the motor and reduced the amount of copper in the final assembly. That's very cool.
Thus making the vehicle lighter and extending the range.
Extending the range and making it more powerful at the same time, which is very cool. Another thing that Sandy Monroe was talking about, they have gone to 48 volts for the accessories. Automakers have been talking about going to 48 volts for years, and it's a really simple reason. I'll give you a primer, if you will. If you take voltage and you multiply it by amperage, you get wattage. Okay, wattage is a measure of power. Voltage is potential. Amperage is current. Well, you need a thicker wire to hold a lot of amps. So let's say you have a 48-watt motor in your wipers that you have to go through the touchscreen to activate. And you have a 12-volt system to power it. No problem, 48-watt. All you have to do is have 4 amps plus quite a bit of wiggle room to make sure it doesn't burn up and all that other stuff. That's the thickness of the wire, 4 amps plus. If you go to a 48-volt system, you have to have a 1 amp wire. So you've reduced the diameter of your wire considerably, and you have reduced the amount of copper that you have to buy every year considerably, and it comes with absolutely no impact on the performance. That is perfect.
Innovation. All right.
I have been inspired by the Batman.
Well, I think you're saying you're in the dark.
Well,
dark room there.
That's a problem. I have a window right next to me, and I have nothing and light. I have no side lighting. I apologize I didn't know that this was going out live to the peoples, but here I am in my trollness, my Batman trollness. Actually, this thing does look like one of the ears of the Batman, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. So Tesla is actually making innovations. They decided unilaterally to be the first car company to go 48 volts on the accessories. That's really cool. Pretty soon, all of them are going to start doing that. I think the battery makers might be a little pissed off, but whatever. What else was in there? They made some significant inroads in the batteries, according to Sandy Monroe, that I did not understand at all. These guys, engineers.
They've also just, in the broad scale, rejected the idea that you're going to outsource the construction of all the components of your vehicle and just assemble it. That every time you buy a part from somebody else, you have to pay them enough to make a profit off the manufacturing. which is, if you're not going to do the manufacturing, then you're just lowering your own profits. So
Yes.
they're doing as much in-house as possible, which, is contrary to conventional wisdom about, production in the globalized age.
Yes, and that's where you get into Peter Zion talking about the end of the world is just the beginning, and how that age, which started just after World War II, is quickly coming to an end. And so they may be having the right idea exactly, and a lot of other companies might be following them in that path. We'll see. That's a good question. So those are the developments. Now, there was one development that I have to question, and it was because of Peter Zion. That's why I mentioned him. The newest of their cars is called the Y class. Oh, by the way, for those of you who don't know, Elon Musk has decided to name every one of his every one of his cars since the S by a single letter. So there's the S class, the E class, the X class, and the Y class. He deliberately did it to spell sexy.
Right on.
That's exactly the kind of prank that I appreciate. So points to him. So the Y class, did you have a chance to look at that the Gigapress at all at the wiki page?
Not in preparation for this conversation, but I'm familiar with it.
Oh, good. So for those of you who don't know, somebody said around the brainstorming sessions at Tesla, what if instead of assembling a body and welding it together and bolting it and welding it together, we just make a body the same way we would make a Hot Wheels car or a Matchbox car, by taking molten aluminum and injecting it into a form, and you have a car, and there it is. And they kind of calculated the forces that would be necessary to make such a thing. And oh my God, it's possible, but the pressures involved get exponentially large as you increase the injection. So they now have something called a Gigapress. It was the only company, whichever company makes it, like signed off on all kinds of disclaimers of disaster in case the thing burst open with molten aluminum flying all over the factory at pressure. But they finally got it to work. So the Y class is made with a single body that was injection molded with molten aluminum alloy that contains about 8% silicates, and then a list of rare earth metals mixed in there that looks like, the pricier part of the periodic table. And the advantage of this is, according to my brother, and I haven't been able to confirm this, it meant that they could assemble the Y class with 350 assembly robots fewer. And given that an automobile assembly robot is about $1 million purchase, that's a significant improvement on their bottom line. It's not necessarily an improvement in the car, but their bottom line is affected. Stockholders like that, just like they don't like Rivian for not doing that. So points to them. But how much energy does it take to take a bunch of silicate and aluminum, smelt them together, and then raise the temperature significantly to reduce the viscosity so that it flows like oil into an enormous mold? That is an amazing amount of heat required for that body. And it significantly raises, as Peter Zion pointed out, the embedded energy that you find in every single one of these cars, such that it becomes questionable if the Y class actually saves any energy at all compared to a conventional vehicle over its lifetime. And Peter Zion put in his book, The End of the World is Just a Beginning, a chart. He did not identify the Tesla as a Tesla. He just said electric car. And it showed the amount of embedded energy and all the energy that went into the various materials. And then it showed a conventional car, and it was like a fifth, if I remember correctly, the embedded energy on the conventional car. And I got to call Peter out on that. That is not a typical electric car. That is one model in one manufacturer's arsenal of electrics. It is not a fair comparison. That is a cherry-picked comparison. And at that point, my respect for Peter Zeihan went down.
Yeah. Now he has a team of people working for him, researchers. He tours and talks so much he can't, be doing all the research that he's reporting on. And in fact, in his daily videos, sometimes he'll turn them over to a member of his team, so they can really do a topic justice. But typically, the researchers are not as charismatic as he is. So it's kind of a wash in terms of, what you gain by handing it over to the specialist and what you lose by, taking the mic away from the MC. But I could well imagine that, that piece of data was not something that he, was deliberately keeping up his sleeve like an ace, to insert in an underhanded fashion, when the opportunity presented itself. Maybe he was, I don't know. But I do understand that how, you can read a very well-researched book with lots and lots of different claims on a variety of topics, but then you spot, then he comes to your area of expertise and you see the flaws. And then you think, well, all of these other areas that I'm not an expert in, was he equally slipshod there? I don't know.
Yeah, and credit where due, the chart, I went to the website where it shows all the charts that were used in the book. Well, all but that one. So maybe somebody caught it. Maybe he didn't vet this properly. I'll give him credit there as well. But for a while I was doing a research, like, why is that number so big? Because I've built an electric vehicle. It didn't take that much energy compared to an electric motorcycle that was there before. And then I learned about the injection molding. Oh, that's why. So
it
credit where due.
Doesn't save any energy in the process of creating the vehicle, but it saves labor, either human labor or robotic labor, which brings down the price. And ultimately, low price is good for everybody. It's good for Tesla because they're going to sell more vehicles. It becomes available to a much larger category of buyers. But then the more electric vehicles there are on the road, the more incentive there's going to be to set up the infrastructure to support them, most importantly, the charging stations.
That's absolutely true. I will say, though, that's why I brought up the 48 volt example. The 48 volt changeover will improve all of that, all the behind the scenes stuff, but it won't affect the performance of the car. In fact, it may even improve the performance of the car. You can put in a smaller, beefier motor because it's working at a higher voltage, for example, for the windshield wipers and all the other stuff. This thing, though, if you count embedded energy as a savings to the frickin' planet, is actually detrimental. It improves their bottom line, but it passes on the increased carbon emissions as an externalized cost, which is, I think, Peter Zeihan's point in the book.
Peter Zeihan has an unpopular take on environmental issues generally, in that his view doesn't satisfy either of the entrenched camps. For a lot of people, any solar panel you put up anywhere in the world is morally virtuous. And Peter Zeihan says, no, let's look at this. There's this thing up in the sky called the sun, and depending on where you are in the world, you're going to get more or less, electricity out of it with a solar panel. And a lot of places that are really gung-ho for this stuff, like Vermont, really have no business putting up any solar panels because they're dark most of the year. They don't get that much sunlight. And places like Texas and Arizona, or Nevada, there is plenty of solar in those places, but there could be more. And there's some local resistance to it, just sort of on cultural grounds. Like I remember, this is not representative of, conservatives in general, but there was a time when there was a meme, not a meme exactly going around, but an argument going around that solar panels depleted the sun's energy faster and was shortening the life of the sun.
I'm sorry, what?
That solar panels were shortening the life of our local star because they were sucking up all of the electricity, all of the electrons, or all of the photons that were coming out of the sun. As if, the panel had some ability to reach out into space and collect photons and bring them down rather than just, making use of whatever hits the panel.
What the flying what?
Yeah, yeah.
That is some deep thinking nonsense.
It didn't last long. That's why I prefaced it by saying, look, I'm not saying this is emblematic of, the anti green energy mentality, but yeah, they do go to some dumb places in search of, supporting arguments.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
that's amazing. I mean,
Anyway, back to
okay.
Peter Zion. He's the kind of guy who says, "Hey, let's just do the math, shall we? Let's see how much energy this thing cost, to create this thing being the solar panel, to create, transport to where you're going to put it and install it and then operate it, with maintenance, and then compare that to, the electricity that you're going to get out of it over the lifetime of the panel."
Hmm.
And in
Hmm.
a lot of environments where solar panels are very popular, like in Europe or in northern parts of the United States, it just doesn't make economic or thermodynamic sense that, over the lifetime of this device, you're actually not going to get as much energy out of it as was put into it, and put into its creation.
Well, he has to go based on rough estimates. He has to go by, we bought this and we're going to retire it in 25 years. What he may not be considering, again, this may be one of those, his flunkies have been vetting this stuff and they may have missed that. A lot of old retired panels are put on the aftermarket and they last another 50 years. They just haven't been making them long enough to really know the lifetime of a panel. The panels themselves decrease in efficiency and output starting at about after 10 years, and then it kind of trickles down, and people decide, okay, when it gets to this point, on average, we're going to retire it and put something else up. But that doesn't mean it's ineffective. And in fact, in some of the northern locations, to defend a little bit of that, there's less wear on the panel. So they may have longer lives than if they're put in the desert in the most intense sun that everyone can find. I'm not discounting his cost evaluation. I'm just saying, these things go forever unless they're smashed by a branch or something like that. Then everything's going to die at that point. A big enough branch falls on you. There are other considerations, but okay.
There are, but a lot of the people who are super gung ho for solar they're excited about it for cultural reasons.
Yes.
Yeah. And Peter Zion himself has solar panels on his home. He's not carrying water for the lunatics who say that
No.
you're depleting the sun with your solar panels.
And he's also in Colorado where they get a heck of a lot of sun.
Yeah.
As long as the snow can clear off of it in a timely manner, you don't have to have the wire. And that's what a lot of people also, if he's out in the middle of nowhere, as I suspect he is in his videos, he's kind of a hiking buff. So he looks like he has a bit of a remote place. How much energy goes into making the wires that would carry the grid power to your house if you're out in bumfuck Egypt? If you've got solar panels, it's a very different metric as opposed to grid.
Yeah. I remember being on the farm in Summertown, Tennessee, and we didn't have any sort of wired internet. Everything was satellite, and satellite internet at the time sucked. Oh, did it suck?
It's much better thanks to Elon, isn't it?
We could talk about that. Yeah, you're talking about Skylink. Is that what it's called?
Yes,
Starlink.
Starlink. Yeah.
Have you seen the animations of not like the projected pattern of satellites, but the actually existing in orbit functioning Starlink satellites?
I was sitting out in front of my house and just looking at the stars one night. I love to do that when the weather's nice. And I nearly shat myself because I saw something I had never seen before. Usually you see a dot crossing the sky. I saw a line of dots crossing the sky, a jagged line of dots. I'm like, it's too slow for a meteor coming in. It's going too fast. What the hell is that? And I had to go look it up. It was the Starlink satellite deploying. So when they deploy, they carry 6 links, little guys, little tiny guys. And they have a solar panel on them that folds out, and the solar panel aims at the sun, and that activates their ion thrust motors. So they move away very slowly from the mama ship and spread themselves out on the sky until they put themselves in place. And it looks like a string of pearls that's moving slowly across the sky. Now, I thought it was pretty cool. And then I realized maybe I should look in on the astronomers out there and see what they think about Starlink and Elon Musk adding to a sky that had at one point just over 2,000 man-made objects, 8 to 20,000 man-made objects. That's his plan right now. And you can tell if you look at star fields that when people complain about Elon Musk, the Starlink ones are the ones that are parallel because they all started in the same orbit and then they spread out from there and then they put themselves in a stable position. So there are a lot of parallel lines running across these exposures from the astronomy, the telescopes. And will that destroy earthbound astronomy as we know it? It's too soon to say. Yeah.
I would be very surprised if it did.
But it's just, wow, that's a lot of stars. That reminds me of the Koribashi maneuver where the two little guys start making the web in front of the Enterprise.
The Tholian web, yeah.
The what?
The Tholian web.
The Tholian web, yeah. And then you meet a young Clint Howard with a bald cap. It was Clint Howard. It was Ron Howard's brother who played the Tholian, and they put an adult voice on him, but he was like 8.
We might be thinking of 2 different episodes then. Tholians are not humanoid looking at all, and I remember an episode you're talking about where it seems like this big object is very menacing, but then eventually Kirk and Spock and crew get over there, and it's basically a little kid, as you say, with an adult voice dubbed in, and he's very welcoming.
Yes,
that's very different from the Tholians. The Tholians are these nasty things that live at very high temperatures, and they're, they don't have faces. They don't have. They're very unappealing, uncharismatic aliens.
Well, there was an uncharacteristic, unappealing alien as a puppet.
That
the guy was using.
Still, it was a humanoid. It had a face. It just looked.
It had a face, right?
Yeah.
And then Clint Howard welcomed it in. Tranya, I hope you relish it as much as I.
Yes.
I was very disappointed. I was very disappointed to go to the Star Trek experience in Vegas, and they had Klingon blood wine, and they had Romulan ale, but they didn't have any Tranya.
Oh.
It was very sad because it's orange juice based. Come on, what's not to love? So that. Yeah. Now that have you gotten Starlink by any chance, or is this still?
No, I live in town. I have cable internet.
Yeah.
It sustains this conversation.
Yeah.
Or my side of it anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, I mean, what's better than coaxial cable in terms of bandwidth and reliability?
Well, I had DSL over the phone line for years, and then squirrels got busy in the alley, and the phone company came out and said, well, we're not going to replace it. And I'm like, what? We're going to upgrade you to fiber at no extra cost. So, Jim got wood right away.
All right.
So I'm doing pretty well. I was very happy with that.
So what's better than coaxial cable? Glass.
Silicon, baby.
Yeah. So we are, or what did we do? We gathered here to talk about Elon Musk and Tesla in particular. Have we exhausted what you wanted to say about that?
Well, let's see. Let me just recap real quick. I have nothing against Tesla in particular. I'd really like to meet the people that work back there in the development. Those guys look like they'd be fun to hang out with. Elon, whenever you put so much... Actually, I was going to mention this. Malcolm Gladwell had a book called Outliers. Mm-hmm. And at one point, he looked at the number of plane crashes, and he correlated that with the country of origin flying the plane. And he realized there was a real disparate rate of crashes in South Korea and Latin America. And this is weird because, pilots are pilots everywhere. What's going on? Turns out, culturally, South Korea is one of those countries that you walk into a room, everybody knows the hierarchical position socially of everybody else and behaves accordingly.
Yeah.
The same happens in Latin America, where you have, tin pot dictators and people take it seriously. And it turns out when you have a cockpit full of people that defer to one person, things get lost like, Captain, maybe we shouldn't do that because we're about to crash.
Gotcha.
When Elon Musk walks into a room and insists on no yellow, maybe somebody should say, Elon, you're the guy. I get that, but it's important to have yellow in a factory. And that really that hit me, is like, I'd like to meet the people that aren't Elon, who have to say these things to Elon. I'd like to get a feel for what they have to do just to get yellow important, like emblazoned in this guy's brain, for him to just give it up. And then hopefully he has. Again, if there are red and black or yellow and black stripes in the factory, I'm happy with that, because I work in a union, and I'm starting to see the value of employee feedback to management and safety and culture, and keeping people healthy and happy. I don't like to see people injured on the job just because one person wants to work them harder than they should. And that'll apply to Bezos as well, probably even more so.
So is it a documented fact that there are a higher rate of injuries in the Tesla shop floor than, say, at a Toyota factory or a Ford factory?
According to the investigative reporting, yes. It's
By how
significant.
much? Significant.
I don't remember. It's been years since I heard that reporting. That's why I sent you the things. I can probably look up I could probably look things up, but it was at one point significantly, like 2 or 3 times, but I don't hold my memory to that. Significantly higher. And the fact that there were so many unreported injuries made it worse. I think somebody actually leaked from Tesla an actual injury rate. I know that happened with Amazon. Somebody in Amazon leaked all of the injuries from all of the fulfillment center warehouses in the country, and the reporters have been poring over it ever since and going, wow, this is pretty high.
From what I've heard and read of life on the floor at an Amazon fulfillment center, it seems nightmarish. Mm-hmm. Basically, human beings pushed with repetitive labor, repetitive motion, and just treated like machines, basically.
Yeah.
The robots on the floor are the ones setting the pace for the human workers, and it's a punishing pace.
Well, I heard on your show when you were talking about Jeff Bezos when you were working there, and how he said he wanted this to be an intense workplace. Mm-hmm. And when you're sitting there as a code monkey or as an operator on the problem lines, or any of the technical aspects, the sales crew, whatever, make it intense. But when it comes to the physical task of physically moving the body and fulfilling orders, that's not pushable. There's a limit. It's different from the mental limits and the emotional limits, and those are enough of a toll. But when you're working with robots scouring all over the place and forklifts and stuff like that, you need to slow down and take it safely.
But then you won't, as a customer, you won't be able to get stuff quite as cheap at Amazon,
Actually, you will. I mean, that's there was an investigation into Amazon, and it turned out they were fixing prices higher, so that, or they were fixing prices in such a way that it supplemented the Prime delivery service. Because even though they have Prime delivery by subscription, it's not enough revenue to cover all of the Prime delivery infrastructure. So they kind of manipulated things and fixed prices to make it work.
Well, we could go into the sins of Amazon. They are many. But I listened to the audiobook of Peter Zeihan's most recent book, The End of the World is Just the Beginning. What is it? Tracking the End of Globalization or something like that. But I took it in as an audiobook. It was a lot more detail-oriented than his previous books, which were much more sort of big picture. And so it was harder to form a recallable memory, basically. And so it just kind of was in one ear and out the other. I don't have many strong impressions about how his message has evolved, or if it's been consistent over time, because this most recent book is just a blur to me. So you have recently read it, not been in a room while it was playing, but maintained focused attention on it long enough to read the book. And as I recall, you weren't as impressed with it as you were with his earlier works.
That's correct. Yeah. The Accidental Superpower. You're right. He took the narrative slowly, especially when it came to the technical aspects of fracking.
I think that's the absent superpower.
Is that the absent?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the one with the long section on the nitty gritty details of fracking.
Okay. The absent superpower. I thought it was I can't remember anymore. I have all the notes. I could look it up anyway. But yeah, he took that fairly slowly, and then he got into the nitty gritty of the geopolitics in the second half of the book, and which is
where he predicted the invasion of Ukraine.
Yes, absolutely, and points for that. And that actually read more like End of the World. End of the World was kind of like he took all the details that he had laid out in a good narrative form in his earlier books, and he put them together in a kind of a stew for his latest book. He didn't give any real insights beyond his earlier books.
Right. Just kind of elaborating and adding detail and footnotes. And
he's drawing conclusions, exactly, without necessarily supporting him. Why would he support him? He already supported him in the earlier books. So, okay, fair enough. It was inconsistent, and maybe that has to do with the amount of data that he was trying to whittle down and press into the book. And my brother, I shared some of his stuff with my brother, and he absolutely hates him now because of he goes to talk to somebody and he just makes a general pronouncement as opposed to backing it up. But from his perspective, he's already backed it up in his books. So why should he have to repeat it all the time? So everybody who goes in cold to a Peter Zeihan is like, wait, what? Wait, you can't just make that claim. It's like, well, it's backed up in my books. Like, well, I haven't read your books. So you have a bunch of people that are just saying we're done with him. And my brother forwards these videos of people who's like, he just said that that Russia would he just said that Russia would nuke a NATO member. That's never going to happen. And I'm like, well, I remember his earlier books, and well, we don't know that that's never going to happen. But when you hear Peter Zeihan just say, Russia's going to use nukes, like, it just hits everybody wrong because they don't have the background. And I don't know how many of his assumptions are kind of like the Model Y problem.
The what problem?
The Model Y problem.
Oh, Model Y, which is what?
It was the amount of energy used compared to a conventional car. Therefore, conventional car is a better way of going. And by the way, I have to maintain my speaking engagements at all the oil companies. It's like,
Yeah, that's an issue I have with Peter Zeihan, is it does seem as though he panders to the prejudices of his audience.
You got to read the room.
Yeah. Or, just read the room in advance by booking the right audiences.
Yeah, read the room that signs the checks. Exactly.
Alrighty, so Benner Rubber says, "Hey Jim, never seen your radio face. Delighted."
Well, I've been saying for years that I have a face for radio, as you can see. Yeah, I'll even give you more, Benny.
There you go.
Alas.
Actually, it was Benner Rubber who sent me the link to Tim Pool catastrophizing about AI.
Yeah.
I told Jim about that. Jim didn't really know who Tim Pool was. He's old.
This is the color gray.
Yeah. So
maybe I can turn this light. Oh, there we go.
It might look like I'm just growing a beard right here, but it's not the case. I mean, it goes all the way back to here, but after about there, it's white. So
why don't you grow that part?
I mean, I've grown it before. It's just, I look like Santa Claus with just a little bit of dark right here. So
Yeah, I have just the opposite. I have the gray right here, and then on the side, nothing happens.
Ah,
So it just comes out looking like fuzz. So yeah, this is. I guess I didn't have enough complaints about Elon Musk to fill a full hour,
it's all
which
right.
is an improvement, I guess. Most people just hate him. I'm like, well, I don't. And another thing, I'm now reading Douglas Rushkoff's Survival of the Richest.
Ah, which I don't
And
even know about. I used to read all of his books like as soon as they came out, and I'm just not reading that much anymore. I'm not saying I don't like Doug Rushkoff or his message, but I don't read his books anymore.
have you read, let's see, Throwing Rocks at the Google Bus?
I owned it for a time.
Okay, never
It's in
mind.
a box around here somewhere, but no, I didn't read it. I've listened to him recount, portions of it.
Hmm. Yeah, he lately has been. Did you hear about the incident that happened where he was invited to speak?
Yes, he's made
Yes,
quite a bit of that.
he has. Well, he made a book about it, and I have to say I have to agree with his conclusion that the very very wealthy have a different mindset than the rest of us,
Yeah.
and maybe that's the reason they shouldn't be very very wealthy. I don't know. That's I'm kind of
Well,
leaning in that direction myself.
in particular, I mean, for those who don't know what we're talking about, Doug Rushkoff, he speaks in front of a lot of audiences, and typically he doesn't prepare. He just gets up, and that's his gift. He can just flow. And so he got invited to go address an audience, and he got a big speaker's fee, and he was. So he went and he was shown into a conference room, and he thought, oh, this is like the green room. They're going to escort me out into an auditorium here in a bit. Nope, that was where he was to give his presentation, and the presentation was just him answering questions from a handful of billionaires. And their concerns were, we've built our doomsteads off in Alaska and New Zealand and whatnot, but we're worried that, once all of civilization has collapsed and money doesn't mean anything, that our guards won't be loyal to us anymore. And we need to figure out, how to keep them serving us even after civilization has collapsed. And, should we lock up the food, or should we put like shock collars on them, or, how do we control our muscle? And Doug Rushkoff's like, well, maybe instead of preparing to flee the destruction of the world, you should put your effort into creating a sustainable, just world that people don't mind living in, and then you don't have to worry about your bodyguards, usurping control of your doomstead after civilization has failed. And they're like, I don't think so.
Yeah. They would prefer to get a battle royale shock explosion collar on all of their Green Berets that they've hired instead of,
Exactly.
as Douglas Rushkoff suggested, paying for his daughter's bat mitzvah. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, he wrote several versions of telling that story as articles and things, and I guess he expanded it into a book, but I have not read the book.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through, but I bought the book because I wanted to give him a little money. And that means that I have to set it aside when I get something from the library because the clock is ticking. So I'm in the middle of Choke Point Capitalism by Cory Doctorow now.
Ah, is it fiction or nonfiction?
Nonfiction. He
Okay.
had a co-author, a woman, professor from Australia, helped him. But I'm seeing a lot of Cory Doctorow's influence. I mean, I'm glad that I can see his influence because I get a little tired of the book says this person wrote it, but I don't see any influence.
Right. The publisher is proud to present this person's name on the cover of this book.
Yes. You
Yes.
don't know the other person's name, so we won't bother writing it on the cover.
But this other person actually did the tedious work
That's
of
right.
writing the book.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Anywho.
Cory Doctorow, science fiction author, a good friend of Charles Strauss. He's written about the singularity. He's written, just fun looks at the near future. What do we got here? That's interesting, says Ben Rubber. That's my friend's response to someone robbing their store. Quote, you should just let them rob you because we should have prevented their desperation in the first place. Close quote. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. For those who don't know, I drive transit, which has become an alternative housing situation for many people. And I have to say, sometimes the behavior in which they engage is probably not appropriate for the bus itself, such as I now know what's fentanyl, meth, and crack all smell like when ignited.
Oh.
Uh, you know, most of them smell like you're losing a fan belt.
Mm-hmm.
So they're unpleasant. And also, I have not experienced this myself, but turns out a bus is a pretty good outhouse.
Good in what sense?
Convenient, out of the
Yeah.
rain, warm. Um, we have a new person that went into higher management. She was going to take some friends who work with her on a little bus ride because she didn't ride a bus before. She came from the post office. So she wanted to take a bus into a nice neighborhood. And somebody suggested, no, why don't you take this bus? And within 15 minutes, somebody defecated in the aisle. And she hasn't been on a bus since.
And is it up to the bus driver to clean that up?
Oh, no. We don't make drivers handle biological efflua. We have people that come around and take the bus out of service and clean up properly. Yeah.
So Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, LA have all adopted a similar policy in terms of the homeless, which has generated a similar result in all four places, which is rather shocking when you see it in real life.
Yes.
I have not been to Seattle since 2013, I think.
Manifesting in meat space, I believe.
Yeah, but I have been to Los Angeles and also through San Francisco and Oakland much more recently, like this year, 2022. Go ahead.
I don't know that the problem is the policy the city council has adopted. I believe that's where we need to talk about the wealthy and the fact that these people, if they can get housing, cannot get a job to afford it. And if you are stuck on the streets for no fault of your own, well, theft and drugs are two ways of dealing with the pressures that situation offers. And I say this as somebody who has been homeless, not for very long. I have the friends who are able to accommodate. I was able to shower and all, and I was working a lot while I was in that position. But in 1989, the cost of housing was going up 3% a month. So I had a choice. I could quit my job and move to where it's affordable, or I could live where I was and not afford it as long as I could. I chose the middle path. I kept working and I just lived in my van for a while. And after the season ended, it was a seasonal job. I just kind of kept living there, but closer to friends. And eventually I wound up in a position where I could afford the housing. That was actual housing, But if you don't have the social skills to get along with your friends and make sure they don't kick you out, and as many of these people suffer, I don't know what we're going to do. I think we need to go all Georgist on the whole issue of rent. And we need to start charging a lot of money in taxes to people who won't lower the rent to a living wage. I mean, right now, the median one-bedroom apartment in Seattle is over $2,000.
Yeah. Which
and
is, 25 grand a year in rent alone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is amazing. I mean, people who earn $20,000 are out of any chance of housing if they can't get along with others. And 2 and 3 bedroom is not much more, or is so much more than they can. Even in the old days, like you and I, KMO, we got together with friends and we rented out a house. A house of that size would now be prohibitive for all involved, unless they have other sources of income like parents who chip in the bill. The city council is reacting, but the cause is outside of their control.
I'm skeptical about that, though, just because of the ideological similarities in the places where this problem is most acute and most visible. Like, I've been to various parts of this country in recent memory, and yeah, I saw homeless people in Dallas, Texas, but it wasn't like it is in San Francisco, or Oakland or Los Angeles. There are homeless people. I haven't been to New York since the pandemic, so I can't really comment on what it's like right now. But, I remember how it was in the 70s, places like just lower Manhattan, all of it was just, it was a jungle. It was decaying. There were Like my ex-girlfriend Olga, she was squatting in Greenwich Village for a time because there was lots of buildings that were really not habitable. You couldn't pay people, you couldn't charge people to live in them, but people would live in them for free. And now that's the most expensive real estate in the world, and it's all and that was largely Rudy Giuliani's doing. Like he was the mayor twice, and he was the one who turned Times Square from this like seedy, awful place that you didn't take your family to basically Disneyland.
Right.
So policy can have a lot of effects, and the policy, like the ideological agenda in those 4 West Coast cities that I keep, repeating the names of, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, you have a similar political mentality and you have a similar outcome. And, it's ugly because we live in a situation where things are very expensive, in these very prosperous cities. And yeah, they need low cost labor. So there's work to be had there, but the work doesn't pay enough for you to live like a normal person. But most of the people that you're going to encounter, like on Skid Row in Los Angeles, they're not struggling working people who, are holding down a job and just struggling to make rent. They're largely incredibly damaged people who are not competent to make life decisions for themselves and who are, living like animals on the street. And at some point, those streets need to be reclaimed. You just have to say, look, I know you've got an easy situation here and people are enabling you and make it very easy for you to live like this, but this is not acceptable. You cannot be here. And I'm a guy who's, except for the money that I make as a podcaster, jobless most of the time. I don't have enough to have a car right now. I'm living rent free, but I'm not an addict. I have not burned all of my bridges. I have not ruined all potential, relationships with all people who might want to cooperate with me. And I can't claim to be a moral Superman. It's just I didn't come up in an environment where that sort of lifestyle was presented to me as a respectable, viable option, that would be facilitated by people making it easy for me by providing me with, food and other services when I'm living on the street.
Well, introduce a concept. What if this is happening all across the country and the people who are the most desperate are simply moving to those places that tolerate it?
Well, there is certainly that is happening. Yeah. I mean,
right.
You can go to LA and ask people where they're from. And a lot of times, most of the time, they're not from LA. Why did they come there? Because it's easier to live there.
Right.
But it's easier to live in a certain way. It's
right.
That lifestyle is facilitated by civic policy in those places, and you get a result which is a total destruction of the quality of life for everybody who has to be in those places.
Mm-hmm. No, and that's true. And there are certain. I mean, I seldom encounter that kind of destructive lifestyle where I am, because I think the police, though they have backed off quite a bit on enforcement, they are drawing lines, and people are being concentrated in certain areas because of the complaints of people like myself and my neighbors who are saying, no, this guy's living over here and he shouldn't do that. So I guess I understand the facilitating argument. I'm curious as to structurally, economically, what can be done to avoid the situation of needing to facilitate.
Well, you can just enforce the law. If some crazy, junky, homeless person attacks somebody, physically attacks them, they go to jail. That's why. Why is that like some crazy repressive, fascistic mentality?
George Floyd. That's when the cops said, "Okay, we're going hands off." If they're going to, if this guy is, they saw the entire video, and I'm not condoning the poor guy who, let's face it, he's up for murder. But every cop in the country said, "Wait a minute, the rules have changed. We're backing off." Give you one example. On our buses, if somebody refuses to get off, they have us take the bus to a location. They have people try to encourage the person to leave, and we get another bus to drive. Sometimes I think the record is 9 hours, a person sitting on a bus and refusing to leave. And all of that is because the cops are like, nope, we're done. Nope, we're not going to even touch this.
It's beyond cops, though. Even prosecutors, like somebody could be arrested for dealing drugs down, like in the Pike Place Market or the Westlake area, and they're out the same day. Prosecutors just decline to prosecute them.
I suspect that some of the places that don't have nearly as open a problem are dealing with the situation similar to the way my neighbor dealt with a cat that got into her house and started tormenting her cat. They just took a drive out of town with the cat in the carrier. I think there's probably a lot of...
I might have that cat.
No, it went to Discovery Park. You probably don't.
No, I have a cat. He's not my cat. I mean, he was here when I got here, but he's he's like a very charismatic, friendly, human-oriented cat, but he's got a few behavioral issues. Like he will not tolerate any other cats present. And also, if you're outdoors and you're interacting with him and then you turn around to walk away, he will launch himself and just attack your legs. Like, don't turn your back on this cat. So I'm fairly confident that he was a house cat. He's clearly not feral. He's very people oriented. Mm-hmm. But I think somebody just got sick of him, just drove him out here to the country and dropped him off. And
or he could be like our cat who just appeared one day in the neighborhood, and so we adopted her and everything was fine. I let her out one night and she ran, and we didn't see her for 3 days. And thanks to the internet, we found where she was, and put her in the carrier. And when she got out of the carrier, she looked around. It's like, this place again? Oh. I've never been in a place twice. And we think she just has these little crazy moments where she gets lost and then has to, okay, I need to eat. And she just goes insane. And we saw a few instances of this as she grew up, but she stopped going outside after that little trauma. But I'm saying somebody is maybe doing this with people, moving them to places where facilitation is there and maybe against their will.
Well, for a time, it was well known that in Los Angeles, people being discharged from medical hospitals would just be driven to Skid Row and dumped. But I don't know about moving them cross country against their will.
Well, they've been doing this for many years, actually. I heard about it first in the 70s. Somebody who didn't like the look of somebody would hand them a free one-way ticket to Seattle. This happened in Buffalo, New York. This happened in New York City. I've heard it happening in Florida. And all these people are coming off the bus. So what's going on? And it became a big radio thing. It became a meme. And it would last a couple of months, and then it would just kind of die out. But I don't know. I mean, as long as there is profit to be made in rental income, this problem is not going to go away.
Yeah. Well, this problem is just not going away.
No, nothing. We can talk about it all we want, and nothing will happen. That's right.
Well, I mean, the situation will evolve over time, but yeah, not because anybody said, you know what, I heard this guy KMO on a podcast, and man, he really made some sense. Let's re-examine city policy, shall we?
Well, hang on. I was listening to a guy named Jim, and he made a lot more sense. And somebody else says, I didn't listen to that show. Shut up.
All right. Well, I think we've got a grand total of 4 people watching.
Oh,
and,
cool.
Two of them have commented.
All right. Well, I should probably click on comments.
Good ratio.
Oh, wow. There's a lot.
Yeah, Ben Rubber has a lot to say. Like, for example, let's see. I've been reading Michael Schellenberger's book on homelessness in San Francisco or something. Have you guys read or checked into that? Wonder of any holes in his perspective. I don't know the book in question, and I don't know his arguments, so I can't comment on that now.
I will say I know of Michael Schellenberger. I don't like him. He was he wrote a book and he did a TED Talk that I actually pointed out in my show. It was he's a paid shill for somebody.
You know, for years and years, I heard Jim Kunstler describe Daniel Yergin as a paid shill for the fossil fuel industry.
Oh.
And then I listened to an audiobook of one of Jurgen's books, and it was quite good. And
Mm.
it was research heavy and information dense, and it wasn't just a yay fossil fuels rah rah status quo kind of book at all. So I'm hesitant now. If somebody describes somebody else as your shill, I just sort of file that away as
Right.
yeah, somebody has an opinion other than yours.
Yeah. Well, I read his book, and I kind of followed his book for a while, and I started seeing things like, wait a minute.
Which
He
book did
was,
you read?
oh, it was back in the 90s.
Was it
Michael,
Commanding Heights? Oh,
no,
Michael
no,
Schellenberger. Okay, go
Michael
ahead.
Schellenberger. No, I haven't read Daniel Jurgen yet. No, but Michael Schellenberger wrote a book essentially saying that um, old eco awareness is dead, and new eco awareness will include nuclear. So you can't really be a progressive person who's really into the environment unless you embrace nuclear. And then he gave a TED talk, and he actually, at the very end of the TED talk, made a comment about people being scared of nuclear. I think, really? that sounded a little too practiced.
Yeah.
Apocalypse Not. No, that was Apocalypse Not
Apocalypse
was
Never. Why environmental alarmism hurts us all is the Michael Schellenberger book.
even before then. Even go back a farther. Michael Schellenberger and another author wrote something. New Wave. I have no clue. But
Apocalypse Not is a book by John Michael Greer.
yes,
Yeah.
that was a very good book. But yeah, boy, I wish I could remember. Yeah, ever since then, I've been kind of looking at. He was actually. I investigated his work in my piece about the distortion factories as part of the Powell Movement series, and I'm like, what is this guy saying? I haven't read anything since.
I think the book that Bennereber is referencing is San Francisco: Why Progressives Ruin Cities.
Well, that's not leading at all.
Well, authors typically don't choose the titles of their books. Publishers do, and publishers want to sell books, so they're going to make the titles provocative, and they're going to fill them with keywords. So we get 25-word titles for books these days.
Yeah. Now Benny's going to have to do the burger up on Audible. Let me know what you find. I mean, I'm open to having my mind changed as long as I don't have to read 7 books to do it.
You will read 7 books, but not because one person said you have to change your mind on a particular issue.
That's right. I usually, if 3 people recommend a book, it's like, okay, it's a must read. And so far, that's worked pretty well.
Yeah, particularly if there are 3 people from 3 different parts of your life.
Yes, that's very important. It's like, oh, wait a minute, hang on. And that's why advertising works as well as it does. You get something on the radio, you get a billboard, you get a magazine article, and you don't even look at each one individually. But those 3 things actually make people go out and do stuff. Now, if it's from a real person, that's a different issue.
Hey, I've got an interview with Are You Serious in the can.
Oh, cool.
Probably be on, I think it'll be on episode number 4 of the KMO show. And, he's a guy who's older than I am, and he's been a publisher, and he just remembers the world of magazines. And I think that young people, they just don't have any clue as to how important magazines used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yep.
Are You Serious is talking about how, he lived in upstate New York for a time, and he used to drive down to New York City to buy magazines because there were certain magazines you could only get, at certain newsstands or bookstores, like in Greenwich Village or, just different little neighborhoods with quirky little bookstores that had magazines you couldn't get anywhere else.
The R. Crumb books, the Fabulous Freak Brothers. Yeah, those are the good magazines.
Oh,
National
so
Lampoon.
Many.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I subscribed to National Lampoon and Mad Magazine for so many years. And, then I went to college.
Oh, even in college. I mean, college was Wired magazine. That was That was my jam. And Mondo 2000, which was the Are You Serious project.
Oh, Mondo 2000, wasn't that Doug Rushkoff too?
He may have written for it.
Okay.
But, yeah, Are You Serious was the publisher.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. The magazines, man. I remember the fanzines here in Seattle back in the early days. There was one, and since we've had the word poop being mentioned every now and again, it was called I Love Poop. And it didn't show poop, didn't show people pooping. It was just people talking and writing articles about how cool it is to poop. And a friend got that for me, and I had it for years. Like this is just such a stupid thing, but you can do it, and it's fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're at an hour and 10 minutes. Shall we wrap it up?
Rapping.
Jim, it is always fun to talk to you. I will not lie. I am not up to date on your podcast. I've pretty much gotten to the point where I've given up trying to catch up, and I just need to go to the current episode and just start again.
Well, Camo, I appreciate that. I was not up to date with your podcast until the other day. Actually, I'm not up to date on the Vault myself. I'm ashamed to admit I am so behind on many things podcasty wise. It's like yours and mine are not the only podcasts in the world. I know. It's shocking, but wow,
there must be at least 3 or 4 other podcasts out there.
I know. Three. Let's say 3. Yeah.
3.
And no worries. I don't. If people want to take a break from the Attack Ads podcast and do something worthwhile, I have no problem with that at all.
Well, I can't say that I've been doing anything worthwhile, but.
Thank you, Camo, for inviting me and letting me rant.
Yep, always fun.
It is fun.
All right, Jim. Talk to you later.
Later.